So this tutorial I'm gonna show you how to really use Docker in real life, how you would go to create containers and talk with containers and why you wanna like separate containers, and I'll be trying to demonstrate to you how you will really use this in real work. You might find other videos on YouTube or whatever, or anywhere else. They tell you, as in my channel, you also can find one that it will actually tell you about the syntaxes, like what is the command to create an image, or the command to delete, or the command to do something and do that and do this. But actually, in the end, you know a lot of commands, but do you really know how to use and when to use, or why you really wanna use Docker? I'm going to show you a practical example of how do I do to use Docker in my real project. So I have here a project I just started. It doesn't really matter which framework you might be using, or if you are using a framework at all. I'm just going to use a Laravel one because it's like very simple and it's easy to explain. And okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is create a Docker Composer file. So a Docker Composer file is like you can save instructions that the Docker will run at every time you need it to rebuild your set of configurations. So you don't need it to manually create everything and then save like in a notepad, and every time you want to remake it again, you like need to run command by command. Here you can like build a file that will reproduce all the commands that you pre-configure before. So to do that, I will create a docker compose.yaml file. This docker compose YAML file will contains all the specification that I want for whatever I want to create. So as it is a Laravel application, I'm going to use the Nginx as my HTTP server. I'm going to use PHP, of course, because it needs to interpret the PHP files. A common usage, I'm going to use the MySQL, because it's very common and probably is what we might also be using right now. And I will, just as a bonus, I will also integrate with Redis. So I will show you how you set up these 4 containers with Docker and just get it working as easy as possible. Okay, so I finished setting up my Docker Composer file, and then I go quickly here to tell you what I have done. So I will be using, just for starting, I will use the Nginx and PHP. So I created this Docker Composer file, and I have added this. This actually is just a name I want to give it to my container to reference inside of this Docker Composer file. So it will just exist inside of this file. So it's okay. You can name it anything you want. And you can notice here I have a container name. This will be the container name outside of this file. So I want to create a PHP container, and I want to create a Nginx container. That will be my HTTP server. So what I have set here so far. For the PHP, I wanted to build it using a Docker file. Why I'm going to use this Docker file? Oh, look, I have set this in the Docker PHP Docker file. So I can open here Docker and PHP and Docker file. This Docker file here, it's pretty much will, how can I say in an easy way, is recreate the container you are copying it from. For example, I am using this container that's php-fpm alpine. And based on this one, I'm making some changes and creating my own container. So Docker allows me to do this. I can take one container as base, add something to it, rename it, push it back to Docker Hub, and use it. So in this case, I'm not pushing back to the Docker Hub, but I am just modifying it. So what are the changes that I'm doing here? So the changes is having a looking at their documentation at the PHP official repository on hubdoc.com, they created a method, a script that facilitated, making it easier for us to install PHP extensions, right? So because I'm using this Alpine version, it's like it's not as simple as just searching the repository and like apt get and install PHP 7, I don't know, PDO or MySQL or whatever. Because the Docker Alpine is a version that is a little smaller than the normal versions of the Linux, because Alpine is just like a Linux with 5 MB. There are a lot of things that's missing on the system. So Docker, so the PHP community has created a script that just facilitates the creation or the installation of extensions. So you can run. So I instruct it to run this script that is called Docker PHP extension install. And what I want to install, I want to install the PDO and the PDO MySQL, because right now I haven't set this in the my Docker Composer YAML file, but I'm going to use this later on. So I wanted to just create it before I just created the PHP already with the final looking I want it to have when I move on to the next steps. Optionally, I also install the Composer. So I just run this command cur to download Composer installer and install it, pipe through the PHP to install it, and then move this to my local bin directory so I can globally access this. And for the last, I use the php-fpm command that will keep it running in the background. So my Docker container will not stop; it will keep running, even if it will just keep it running, this command, and listening to any incoming connection attempt to connect to the PHP, because php-fpm is like listening for something trying to use it. So, and I also have set here an Nginx configuration file that contains some basic things like the root of my project. That is, I am pointing to var www codefaq and public. Some default configurations. This you can find all over the internet. And yeah, and one thing that you need to notice here is that I'm using the fastest CGI pass PHP on the port 90,000. What is this? I'm not using a socket based connection, so I'm not specifying a file, because my PHP is in a completely different container, right? I have one container with my Nginx, and I have another container with just my PHP. So my Nginx like can't access the socket file on my PHP container. I could create some kind of image or bridges that I could let one talk with another in the sense of sharing directories. But I think it's easier just to forward this through a port, right? So by default, this php-fpm is already exposing the port 90,000. If it wasn't, I could do something like this: expose, and then just give it a port number. So for example, 9000. But this is not necessary, because the PHP is already doing this command for me. If I go to their documentation and see their Docker file, how they created this image, you see that they have this command there, so I don't need to do it myself. Okay, so in my Docker Composer back in here, so it will do what? It will say what? Build. I give this directory here as the context, so where he will start looking for the files. So based on this context, he will try to find the folder called Docker. So I have here Docker, PHP and Docker file. I just keep this naming like separated, because sometimes I might want to have many containers, and this Docker file I can actually change the name, but I like this convention, just calling it Docker file and keeping it inside a folder with whatever it is, what it's doing. Okay, so I'm using container name here to call it a PHP, so later on I can easily find it connected to it or attach my terminal to it. Volumes. So I'm currently mirroring this current directory here to be on the PHP on this container var www and docker and codefag. As you saw here in my Nginx, I set my root directory to be www codefag public, right? So this directory will exist because I am creating it just now. If it doesn't exist, it will just create it because this is explicitly saying this. Okay. So next is the Nginx. The Nginx, I'm using the Alpine version. I don't need a Docker file because this Alpine version is already pretty much configured the way I want it to be. So I don't want to install anything else. So I don't have the need to. But if I had the need to install something else or to change some configurations, I would do the same. Create a Nginx folder here and add a Docker file inside. I add this name. I copy the volumes from PHP. I can have many volumes, right? I could just copy this and add here in my volumes array. But yeah, it's just another way to do it. I can volumes from PHP that will just take this one here and append it to my array. It's the same. I just don't want to duplicate myself by copying this path 2 times. Another configuration here that I set is that I want to create a volume that is actually a file, a directly reference to a file that's going to be placed in a folder that's inside of my container. So this Nginx config that you can see here is the config that I set externally, and I wanted this to be on the folder config.d and with the name default. So these volumes not just can sync a folder, but it also can sync a file itself. So if I just give a file here, it will just sync that file there. So if I change this file also will get changed. By default, the Nginx is listening to, will just automatically add any configurations I set inside of this folder. So I don't need like a patch, like enable website or manually go to the Nginx and enable it, because everything that's inside of this folder here, it will be automatically enabled by default. So it's just more convenient for me to add this directly instead of just going there and pointing the Nginx to find my directory and find this file inside of my var www. So it's just an easier way, right? And I want to link this option here, links. What it will do is that he will make one container talk with the another container. What does it mean? You know, there is this container here is exposing the door 90,000, right? If I don't give the links here, I don't link this container to this one, this container here will not be able to listen to that port 9000 or reach that port 9000 because they are not linked together. I need to link one to the another so they can talk with each other. So this is very important to have. And I want to forward some ports. So my Nginx by default, a setting here, I am listening to anything that's coming on the port 80. And so I set here 80, and I want to forward to my host machine 8080, so I can access this. Okay, so how do I go now to create this Docker instance here? I will open my terminal and I will run docker compose. Is another binary that comes together with the Docker when you install the Docker toolbox or the Docker, just the Docker in Mac or in Windows and anywhere, even in Linux, it's available. You can Docker compose, and you can say app. What it will do, it will just start every instance, every container that you have preset on this file here. It's important for this file because has the name docker compose. So this docker compose will just look for this file. However, if you don't want to name this you want to name this differently, you can actually name it differently. But here you need to specify which is file you wanna build it. So just as conventional, I keep the same name. So docker composer app, and I will give a flag here. D to run this in the background. If I don't run this in the background, Actually, I think the meaning of the D is detach. Detached mode is like it will not be attached to my terminal, so I don't get the outputs, because if I don't give the D, I just will everything will be stuck on my terminal, and I can't type anything else. I will need to open a new tab or just close that and open again. So less D will just don't attach to my terminal. So I will run it. So it will start building the PHP and we'll start building the Nginx. So we just need to give it a time, and I will get back when it's done. So it has finished to building the image. As you see, there is a lot of log here. It's just pretty much run every command that I instruct it to run. And yeah, and after that, it's just create the container. So if I do docker ps, I can see there are two containers running, right? One is the Nginx and another is the PHP. As I can see here, you see this one here, as I mentioned, there is one port that is exposed between containers, but it's not exposed to my host system. So as you see here, and this one is the Nginx is that I set, right? I expose it to, I map it to my local computer. So port 80 to my 8080. And you see here the commands that is running. The Nginx by default will run this command that will just keep the container running by itself. And php-fm it's do the fpm do the same. Another thing to note here, it's because the PHP was created by a Docker file, it also creates another image. So if I do docker images, as you can see here, this one was created with default tag laces. So I can actually push this image back to Docker Hub and use it next time. So that means that I will not need to do these commands manually or do these commands again. It will be like save it. And the next time, if I do upload it to Docker Hub, I don't need to give this build Docker file again. I just will give images. So I would say Laravel _ PHP latest, and okay, it will create again. Okay. So how do I test this now? It should be working directly after you Docker Compose up. So if I go to my browser and I go to the port 8080, right? I should see Laravel. Yeah, so I see Laravel default page. So okay, so I have pretty much my Docker container working, right? So now I need to install the MySQL. Okay, so how I will go to do that? So I already have created here a demo route that will try to connect to MySQL. So for instance, Laravel, the way the Laravel will connect from the MySQL is through the model. So I just dump here all the models just for testing. So okay, so I would just again try to reheat this route. It doesn't matter which framework you are using. I'm just using Laravel for convenience. It's easier and easy to set up, and I can demonstrate quickly for you. But the concepts can be applied in any framework or anything that you are doing. So I will hit that route, MySQL. So I can see here the error is that Laravel is trying to connect to the MySQL, but yeah, just there is no MySQL. So how can we fix this error? Okay, so let's create the container now. I will back to my Docker Compose file, and I will paste here a little snippet. So what is it's doing? It's creating an image called MySQL with the name codefag. I'm just prefixing it, but it's not really necessary. If I want to reuse this, many containers can use the same database. I don't need to create one container for each. This is the one of the benefits of Docker, that you can have the same MySQL running to 10 applications if you wanna, or if you wanna isolate, have two different versions running for different applications, you can prefix it. So in this case, I'm just prefixing it because I just for convenience here to demonstrate for you, I can do it. Port, I am exposing the port. By default, the MySQL image will expose this port 3306 to any container. It will be just exposed. but it will not be mapped to my host machine. I map this manually here because I want to use some kind of apps like MySQL Pro, for example, to connect and have a look inside of my database. But if you, for example, you are using PHP myadmin, this will not be necessary. Just exposing this inside internally through containers will be most than enough. But in this case, I wanna access this from my host machine, so I have to expose the port, map the ports. So in this case, I didn't change the port, I just set the same to the same on my system. And also, if you go to the Docker Hub documentation, you can find for the documentation for this MySQL, you can find that there are some environment variables. That is just like for convenience. When you create this image, it will automatically create for you a database called CodeFac, and also will set the password as default. You also can specify another options here, but this pretty much is enough for my use case. That is just set a database name and in a password. So the next step now is just to set these configurations here that I have created. So the database is called CodeFac, right? So I'm going here to my config file, that where I set these credentials. So my database is CodeFac. My username by default will be root. I didn't change this, so it will be the same, root. And the password is 1234556, right? And now there is an important piece here, the IP, the host IP. What is the host IP that I need to connect to? So the host will be my local machine IP. So how do I get that? I can open the terminal again and type here if config, and yeah, it will give me a list of IP things. So what I need is this one here, innet. So this is my local IP address. So I will need to use this one. There is a note here to do, is that if you are using the Docker toolbox, what you need will be your Docker virtual machine IP. In this case, I'm not running the Docker toolbox. I'm using the Docker that's using the Hyper-V emulator, let's say like this, from the Mac itself. So it's not it's not running through VirtualBox. So if it's not running through VirtualBox, what I need is my local IP address. If you are using Windows, for example, you probably might be using the VirtualBox. So for VirtualBox, what we need to do is we need to do the Docker machine IP, and this one will give you the IP. This IP is your Docker machine IP. It's because in here in my system I can get the 2 IP because I have the 2 versions installed. So it is my work for me. But for you, if you just have the one that is using the VirtualBox, you might need to use this IP here. It's not your local IP. Okay, so for this one, because currently I'm running on the Hyper-V version, so I can directly give my local IP, and yeah. So let's create this image. How do I do that? I do Docker compose app and give the D again. So it didn't detect any change on my PHP and Nginx, but it's fine that there is a MySQL, a new one. So it's just created. So Docker PS. And I can see it is running here on that port I just set. So I want to now use the SQL Pro to connect to this externally, right? Because I set this, so now I'm able to. So I will just open the SQL Pro here. So SQL Pro. And yeah, I have here some defaults, some defaults here. So I just list code fact demo. The IP is this IP with 1, right? The name is root, the password 1234556, database CodeFac, and the port is 3306, right? So I should click connect and should connect. Yeah, so I successfully connected to the database. So as you can see, it's MySQL is working. So if right now I back to that to this my test page and give it a refresh. Yeah, you see it's connected, but now this error here is a lot of our specific error. It's saying that there is no table called users. Yeah, and I will just go ahead and create it. Now let's say I needed to run the comments to run the migration right in the Laravel, but let's say my version of PHP, my local version of PHP is 5.0, 5.5 I think, but the one that I'm running inside the Docker is the PHP 7. So if I run my comments locally on my machine, my host machine, it might have some errors because Laravel requires the PHP 5.6, right? So at least I need to use the 7. So how I do that? I can just connect to that container. So I will do like docker exec it, give the name of the container, and I will give what I want to exec inside. So it's the bin bash, right? So it doesn't have the bin bash. Probably because this is an Alpine version of the PHP. So what I need to do is instead is sh. Yeah, so I can access that. Yeah, so my folder is in var www, and the name is codefag. Okay, ls. So this is my project. So I can run PHP here version, and I can see the version that I'm running. So it's this one. And yeah, so I can do PHP artisan migrate. Simple as that. So my migration is run. So if I back to my page and refresh it, now the table exists, but I don't have any users there. So yeah, so this is directly coming from my Docker. Okay. So we successfully created the MySQL, PHP, and Nginx. The next step now is optional, is just to show you that yeah, we can do it, is add the Redis to this mix. So I have pasted this snippet here, that is the Redis snippet that I'm using the Redis Alpine version, because I try to use Alpine as much as I can because it's just smaller, and I prefer to use this on server sides. So as I'm going to use this as I would be using Alpine version on the server, I also like to use it on my local machine, so it's like just feels the same. So if I have any problems, I know how to fix it directly on my machine. I already will have like experience, then just change to Alpine on the server and then have something there, and I don't know what happened. So I like to work as close as possible as I would be doing in the server. So okay, so now I have the Redis here, right? I can do the Docker, I can exit first this PHP instance that is still running here, right? So Ctrl+P, Ctrl+Q, Docker PS is running. So Docker compose appd, it will create the Redis. And again, I need to configure my Redis, right? So how to configure the Redis in Laravel? It's simple, it's pretty much the same. I copy my IP address. Oh, there is a catch here. Actually, if I do docker ps, I haven't export any port on the Redis, right? So as you can see here, it's just internally. This port is internally. So I need a way to make this Nginx talk with this Redis container. But how do they do? How will they ever be able to do that? I will need to know the IP of this container here to set through my Nginx instance. So for instance, how I do that? I will do docker inspec, and then I give the Redis name. So I can have some specs here, I can have any kind of information here I want that will be here. So IP, what I want is this IP. So the one I want to connect is this IP here. So remember, this is the PHP that is passing through the Nginx. So any of those need access to this IP. We will have access to this IP. The password, I didn't set any password by default. I didn't use any envs like here, environmental variables like this. I didn't set any, so I just going with the defaults. So I have set here a dummy route to access the Redis. So when I access the Redis, it will just set a key with this value, and we'll get that value, just display it on the screen. So I back to the terminal, to my browser, and I go to Redis. And yeah, so I can see the string I just set. So how to even be sure about that? It's really using Redis. So I will go inside the Redis container. So docker exec IT, go inside the Docker container. Look, now is this because this is a Alpine version. I don't have the bash inside of this. These Alpine in Linux, they are a little different. They use as few resources as possible, so they have literally deleted the bash from inside the container. So the one that is available is the sh. We can access through the sh. So I will run the Redis. Is Redis, if I'm not mistaken, is Redis client? Yeah. So I am connected to the Redis, as I didn't have any password or anything, so I can directly connect it. And I can say use Redis normally as you would. So Redis key, you can see have the codefac keys. I can get codefac. Yeah, so you see it just works. So I hope this video was not too long, but I think it will be a little longer. But this is the kind of videos that I wish I would have watched when I was learning Docker, because usually Dockers on the YouTube or anywhere else I have seen so far is just tell you about the commands, like, oh, you need to run, you know the command ps, you know the command run, you know the command, I don't know, delete. Yeah, there are a lot of commands, and okay, there are a lot of commands, but how do I use Docker? I know the commands. All these tutorials has taught me a lot of, okay, so I memorize the commands, I know the commands, but I still don't know how to use Docker. So this video I created in order to clarify for you how to use Docker. So I hope you learn it, and any doubts you can leave a comment below, and don't forget to go to my Patreon page and support if you can, or leave your question there. You know, I'm answering questions that is coming from the Patreons and on YouTube, on the Facebook page. You also can subscribe to my channel so you get the latest videos. I'm planning to make one video per week, or maybe 2 videos per week, usually on weekends, because right now is when I have time. But through the weeks I might be answering any questions, any problems, anything that people might have. So thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.